Two very pretty looking speakers. Sony XB33, lovely fabric covering, very durable form factor, colourful party lights. We've got the massive 3 kilos of the Sony XB43. Again, very pretty lights, lovely fabric coating. You can see the drivers in there. And yeah, they put a lot of thought into the design, and we've got, it's very ugly. Any colour you want, as long as it's black. We turn it on, and you can see there's no lights. It must be absolutely awful. Yeah, some of the controls have got lights, but how can it sound good? It's got no LED lights. This is going to be a massacre. Soundcore Motion Boom up against the Sony XB43 and the Sony XB33. I am, of course, joking a little bit. We know what the Soundcore Motion Boom is going to sound like because I've played it before. I've reviewed it before. It's got this massive low-end kind of boom. It is a bit of a boombox, but it's a bit more mature than just a plain boombox. You can get a decent sound out of this if you go into custom EQ. So, in this comparison, I am going to do all of them in custom EQ. I can never get this right. If I do what I think is something that's good with custom EQ and where it's only subtle with custom EQ, and so I do the default, and you say, well, you've done custom there and default there, and you don't know what you're doing. Why are you doing it that way? Look, this one, it's going to be all custom EQ. To be honest, it's not a proper equalizer in the Sony app. You've got 3 bands. You've got the low, the mids, and the highs. And it's not a straight, well, I'm pushing the highs, I'm dropping the mids, because it works relatively. And it does different things at different volume levels. It's not predictable in what it does. So for instance, you could put the bass up, but actually it's not putting the bass up, it's reducing the mids and the highs. Obviously, it's trying to limit its own distortion. So it's trying to be a bit clever, but it's not predictable what it does. And what you can do in the app, you can improve it a little bit, but only in a subtle way. When it comes to Soundcore, when you do get an equalizer for the speaker, it's a proper equalizer. It's predictable in what it does. Almost. Some of them are not doing what you think when it hits maximum volume. However, for the most of the time, it's predictable what it does. Just to quickly give you headline specs, tell you the differences between them. When this came out, the Sony XB43, it was massively priced, although against the JBL Extreme, all other speakers are very, very cheap. So it came out at £200. I see it's £160 on Amazon this morning. That's UK sterling. And a lot of you keep telling me you're getting amazing deals on this. I think up to like £100, £110, which is a fantastic price for a speaker like this. However, be aware, it's very heavy at 3 kilos, no handle. Sony XB33 came out 120. There are deals, but this morning it's still 110. And the Soundcore Motion Boom that a lot of you still can't get, but I'm sure you will get eventually. I got it for 80 quid. I'm seeing this morning, it's 90 quid. So, depending on the deal you get, it's still the cheapest of all 3 of these speakers on the table. It's not the lightest. We've got, as I said, this is a heavy speaker. You pick it up, you know you're picking up a speaker. I've turned it off, I'm going to turn it back on.
Bluetooth connected.
3 kilos of speaker.
Battery fully charged.
Right. 1.1 kilos for the Sony XB33, and in between the two, 1.5 kilos for the Soundcore Motion Boom. You can IPX7 for both the Sony XB33 and the Soundcore Motion Boom. Be aware, I dropped mine in my bathtub, and it did fill with water. It was still playing, but I was rattling, I could hear loads of water. I had to leave it to dry out overnight, and by the morning, it was okay. Not only can you drop the Sony XB43 into up to 1 metre of water for 30 minutes, but it's also dust-proof, so IP67. All came out this year. In terms of battery, the biggest battery is in the Motion Boom. Weirdly, I've got 37 watt-hours of battery, just over 36 watt-hours battery for the XB43, and 20 watt-hours for the Sony XB33. Sony do have the decent codec LDAC. We do have basic codec SBC for the Motion Boom. They are all Bluetooth 5. They all do stereo pairing. They all have USB-C connections. Only the Sony XB43 has auxiliary input. They can all be used as a power bank. They can all be used to make phone calls. Don't Sony no longer tell you what the watts are for their speakers. It's a bit like when I do my mattress reviews. They don't want you to know the exactly things that you're interested in. They don't want you to know. And Sony have gone that route. And it's not as though you couldn't cheat that figure anyway, you know, unless they actually measure it, you know, bang on the spec that you're supposed to measure at. You can basically cheat and say it's anything. A lot of these cheap Chinese speakers say they're like twice the power they are because they talk about maximum wattage rather tthan RMS. The only thing we know for sure is 30 watts on the Motion Boom, probably 30 watts on the XB33, maybe 40 watts on the XB43. Of note, we do have tweeters in the Sony XB43, don't have them in the XB33, and we don't have them, unfortunately, in the Motion Boom. I say unfortunately because, of course, we do have them in the Motion Plus. Get straight in. How do they sound? How do they compare? Around 50% of volume. At moderate listening volumes, the Sony XB33 can match the XB43 in terms of, you know, its sound output and its bass levels. I'm saying at moderate volumes. So if these are the volumes you're listening at, you know, why would you have a 3 kilo speaker when you can have a 1 kilo speaker? Well, we'll say maybe I've pushed the mids a bit higher than they really wanted to go. But obviously, I'm trying to get the best out of the speaker. So to me, these are the best all-round EQs. It's a matter of opinion. Don't shoot me, I'm just the messenger. I will say the Sony XB43 is the only one that extends right up into the high end of the harmonics, right up and past 20 kilohertz. The biggest roll-off at the high end is the Motion Boom. In fact, just like the Motion Plus has a big roll-off, we'll see they're not that keen on harmonics. There is an argument whether you can actually hear it up into those high frequencies or not, and of course it depends on how good your ears are. But when it comes to low-end slam, there's only one winner here. It's not even close. If I average out 40 to 60 hertz, which for speakers like this, I'm saying is your low deep bass, you know, it starts to get, it's not subwoofer territory, but it is what you can hear. It is moving like bass, where it starts to have that rumble, and it's a bass you feel rather than it's a slap in the face. By 7 dB on average in the low bass over the Sony XB33. Yes, fair enough. It is a smaller speaker, 1 kilo, 1.5 kilo, but these are speakers that you're asking me about that I'm also interested in. What is the difference? And if when 3 dB, you know, on average is approximately twice the power, and we're talking 7 dB, that's a massive difference, even if you take into account the difference in size. And don't forget, Sony have told us they've got special technology, I think X-balanced drivers, and they're oval shaped, and so they're going to get more bass. And we're talking on the cheapest speaker, 7 dB, and it's genuine. It's not completely overblown. It's proper deep bass, and it's impressive. And 6 dB up, even on a 3 kilo speaker on the XB43. So that's huge. And that sort of deep bass, quite honestly, is where it transforms a track, where you listen to it before and it's more upper bass and mids and highs. Yeah, it sounds nice, but when you get that genuine low-end slam, it adds a whole new dimension to the tracks. There are tracks that I was okay listening to before, but if I listen to it, say, on the Motion Boom, as opposed to, say, the XB33, it's almost like listening to a different track. When you get that deep bass, there's an element you're now getting where, you know, it's to me, I would describe it as a warmth. To some people that bass may be overdone, but I don't think it's completely overdone. I think it's pretty well controlled. It's not tight, it is loose, but it's quite well controlled. And it's enough to put a smile on your face for a track with the Sony XB33, because you're losing a lot of music because it can't do the low bass. It was just an okay track. The XB43 does have a little bit of low-end rumble, but nothing quite like compared to the Motion Boom. And so I have to say, you know, what you get out of these comparisons will depend completely on what you're listening to. When the difference is, you know, the strength of this speaker is deep bass. When that is what I'm talking about, you're going to be needing to listen to my tracks on something that can actually reproduce, ideally decent headphones, or even a hi-fi system where you're going to hear, you know, you're properly hearing below 50 hertz. If you're listening to this on a Sony XB33, of course, you're completely wasting your time. So those are moderate listening volumes. They're not low volumes, they're moderate listening volumes. For a lot of people, they will be your normal listening's 50%. So, and they're going a bit higher now, around the 75% volume mark.
I was born to be free.
even though I pushed the 150Hz slider in the Motion Boom EQ quite a bit more than I had in my original custom. It's still behind one of our upper bass heavy speakers, the XB43 and the XB33. But I would say possibly the Motion Boom now, a bit more natural in the upper bass by 80Hz. It's got the biggest bass again. And in terms of deep bass, between 40 and 60Hz, it's way bass heavy compared to XB43 and XB33. At 50Hz, it's 10 dB up on the XB43 and 11 dB up on the XB33. At 40Hz, albeit rolled off, still 6 dB up on the XB43, 9 dB up on the XB33. So there's no competition here. In true deep bass, Motion Boom wins hands down. The XB43 has the furthest extension into the harmonics range, right up and past the 20 kHz mark. It's a bit rolled off on the Motion Boom, around the 17 kHz mark. And XB33, probably around 18 kHz. My custom EQ does push the Motion Boom in the high end a little bit past what would be natural, but I think it needs it because of its heavy bass. So you'd expect to see a slope here, 4 kHz and down, where it's a bit flat. XB43 with a roll-off at the exact point we're getting stronger on the Motion Boom in terms of that high end.
If you're into your upper bass, you can either push the slider on the Motion Boom, or indeed, by nature, these are inherently upper bass speakers. A lot of you do prefer upper bass over deeper bass, and that's absolutely fine. That's going to be punch, versus low end rumble. It's going to be a matter of taste, but you're going to lose a lot from the tracks that you don't hear. That it's going to be reproduced on the Motion Boom. That's going to be completely missing on the Sony XB43, which is very upper bass punchy, in the same way as the JBL Extreme 1 was. And a lot of people still prefer the Extreme 1 over the Extreme 2 and the Extreme 3 because they have each different version of that speaker has a little bit less upper bass, a little bit more deeper bass. And a lot of people are not liking that. Go outside, the upper bass becomes something that will travel a bit more. It's going to be a bit more of a party speaker. Bear that in mind. If I'm saying it's amazing, the low deep bass on this, but this has got a bit more upper bass, you may still prefer that. But in terms of reproducing what the track originally had, the Motion Boom is going to be your man. It can reproduce some of the lower frequencies that these Sonys cannot do. So still massive, massive advantage. It's not just a little bit. 7, 8, 9 dB advantage at the same volume, at the same normalized volume levels, and that means matching it to your ear. Not tricks post-processing. When you play them to your ear at a certain volume, those volumes will mean the Motion Boom at the same volume to your ear, perceived loudness, will have massively deeper bass. I described my Sony XB33 as that, by the time it's hitting these 80% volumes, it's starting to sound, you get the roll-off and it's starting to sound, to me, if you take the drumstick and you hit a wet cardboard box, that's the sound you get. There's a reason why professional drummers do not use wet cardboard boxes. So basically I'm saying, I think the Motion Boom still sounds the best. It's the cheapest speaker, and there is a lot of control you've got in the EQ if you don't like the wet sounds. In my comparison, you can massively tweak it, which you can't. It's a subtle difference with the Sonys, and I would say probably the biggest difference when you use the EQ in the Sony, it goes louder, which is probably the main advantage. Okay, maximum volume, ultimate headroom.
La noche se prepara pa' cenar caliente, pa' ponernos indecentes. Pa' este plato tú tienes el ingrediente. Ven y te digo que se siente mal. Cuando me bailes tú me pones high. No uses Gucci, yo prefiero Nike. Te quiero pero con poquita light, 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 light. Díganle al DJ que le ponga más o que se ponga a sudar. Pa' pasarla bien, ella se porta mal cuando suena el Paka, Paka. Díganle al DJ que le ponga más o que se ponga a sudar. Pa' pasarla bien, ella se porta mal cuando suena el Paka, Paka. flow de Medellín. Y estás soltera así como me gusta a mí, pa' bailarme así. Rompe cadera cuando se pone salvaje, moviendo sexy todo ese equipaje. La pista se pone territorio de alto voltaje, pa' rimarse y que llenarse de coraje. Te estoy velando desde hace horas, de aquí no te vas sola. Mami, tu flow de barrio está de moda y yo te quiero toda. Díganle al DJ que le ponga más, o que se ponga a sudar. Pa' pasarla bien, ella se porta mal cuando suena el Paka, Paka. Díganle al DJ que le ponga más, o que se ponga a sudar. Pa' pasarla bien, ella se porta mal cuando suena el Paka, Paka.
At maximum volume, with these custom settings, was a surprise to me. Motion Boom is the loudest. It's the loudest no matter how you measure it. LUFS, RMS or peak. It's louder than the XB43, and we've still got loads more headroom to push that bass on the Motion Boom compared to the XB43. At these volumes, it is the XB43 as we would expect, retaining its signature upper bass heavy sound. At 80 Hz, there's nothing between the two, the XB43 and the Motion Boom. But by lower bass, 40 to 65 Hz, 7 dB advantage to the Motion Boom in its lower bass. When I say lower bass, that's the rumbly bass. It's pretty much devoid of that now at these maximum volumes on the XB43. It does extend higher into the harmonics on the XB43, but it really is the Motion Boom's bass that makes it very listenable even at maximum volume. Sony XB33, big roll-off now, the maximum volume. Obviously, it is the smaller speaker. Even against the XB43, it's 8 decibels down at 80 Hz and 5 dB down in the lower bass.
It was a surprise to me, even though it's a custom EQ battle, the Motion Boom goes the loudest. We know it's 30 watts. I'm guessing 40 watts. Maybe it is 30 watts. I mean, why would you put 30? Why would you have that the same power as that? Is it the same amp? That would make no sense at all. Anyway, it's a 3 kilo speaker. This is a 1.5 kilo speaker, and it goes loud. It goes louder. Big advantage in the deep bass. Sony XB33 really doesn't hold up at maximum volumes. Near maximum volumes, there is a big roll-off. Doesn't sound that pleasant, but it's a nice speaker at lower volumes. Between these two speakers, it's, you know, the XB33 does match the Sony XB43, surprisingly, in the bass at moderate listening volumes. By the time you hit maximum volume or higher volumes, Sony XB43, if you're choosing between these two, becomes your man if you can handle that 3 kilos, which is, you know, that's a fair size in your hand, and that's pretty light. I mean, that is 3 times the weight of that speaker. But really, in between the two, but it goes the loudest. It's got genuinely deep bass. Now, that deep bass may be a bit much for some. I really like it, but it is a bit tiring in the long term. And then I switched to Motion Plus. So I've been, you know, I keep jokingly calling the Motion Plus pound for pound world budget champion, or pound for pound world champion. And I'm saying it's a split decision. I think they both, the Motion Plus and the Motion Boom, offer the same value to me, except that one has fantastic deep bass, really satisfying deep bass that the Motion Plus simply can't do no matter what you do with the EQ. But the Motion Plus offers a more relaxed listen, more refined listen, more hi-fi type listen, a more detailed, and it has tweeters, and it has a more open sound. So I think they complement each other. So if I get a bit tired of that, I'll switch to the Motion Plus. But I have to say, there are tracks that simply only sound good on the Motion Boom, because it's the only one of the two that can reproduce, even at these 3, that can reproduce that low-end thump. And it's genuine. A lot of these boom boxes just push the upper bass. and have a little bit of lower bass, and it's not very balanced. It's not that pleasant. If you know, if you're used to listening to decent music, a lot of people, yes, you just want to party, you just want a boombox, and the W King D8 and even the W King D9 suit you. But if you want something that's a bit more discerning, a bit more detailed to the ear, and a bit more balanced, the Motion Boom does that. It can be both a boombox, but something you can listen to long term. Having said that, that deep bass can be a bit much for some. I can see that happening, and the Motion Plus will still fill that void. Bear in mind, the Motion Plus is actually smaller. It's a smaller speaker than the Motion Boom. I think the Motion Boom beats out the Sony XB43, and therefore certainly beats out the Sony XB33. And quite honestly, I mean, I think it probably beats the JBL extremely priced 3. It's just if you plug the JBL Extreme 3 into the mains, it'll go a bit louder. But really, I mean, it's doing most of the things you want at a proper, you know, 80, 90 pound, whatever you're going to pay in the UK, equivalent in the country where you are. You can't really argue because it's a decent listen and a boombox, and you can also have the Motion Plus and have cash over compared to a single JBL Extreme 3. Okay, hope you got something out of this video, and I, of course, thank you for watching.